This is how easy it is to create your own spot welding machine. These are 6 supercapacitors, each of 120 farad. So in total we have 720 farad. And at first I want to charge the supercapacitor. So if I clamp the ground and the voltage supply, I see there are 0.4 volts charged on the supercapacitor, and now I turn on the charging, and at 1 volt it's already charging it with 5 amperes. To have a better overview, I will do one thing. I will first set the power supply to 2.7 or 2.8 volt, because it will charge up to 2.7 volt, and then I will clamp on the supply, and now the current limiter will drive down the voltage to 1 volt to limit it at about 5 amps. So the capacitor is now charging. To see the current charging status, I will use my multimeter. So I'm using voltage DC, and I have a voltage of 0.8 volt. So as soon as the multimeter reaches 2.7 volts, the capacitor is fully charged. You see the power supply is about 0.3 volts above the current loading. It's because the wires and the voltage supply also have internal resistance, which limits, which further divides the voltage. So in the meantime, I can prepare my welding setup. So I'm using a third hand to hold the piece I want to weld. I am welding this knife blade. So I will clamp the blade into my third hand. And I will use this piece of cable that I want to weld on this blade. The charge has reached 1.5 volts, so still a bit to wait. So if you have your capacitors in parallel, like I have here, you will get a low voltage like 2.7 volts, but a very high current. And if you put them in series, you will increase the voltage, but it also reduces the capacity, because the energy stored in a capacitor is the voltage squared times the capacity. So the more volts you have, the square more energy is stored in the capacitor. So if you put them in series, it doesn't the stored energy stays the same, so the capacity will decrease. So we reached 2 volts. And I think we can already weld. So I will remove all the clamps. I will connect the negative. I will connect the ground with the clamp to my working piece, and now I can use this to weld. Now let's bring in our welding piece and let's weld. It's a bit clumsy because the wires are really stiff. And now the thing is welded on. I can remove the welding machine now. And you see, it is a really strong connection. So I have to pull really hard to break it. Just this small spot that I welded, and this is how you make your own spot welder. One thing, there are really cheap titanium and wolfram tips for weak and thick welding, and if you really want to build a spot welding machine for daily use, you should buy one of these tips, because they don't melt and weld together. So I can show it in an example. Show you an example. I have this iron bar, and if I weld on this piece, the welding machine starts to weld on the iron. So I have to apply some force to remove it again. And this does not happen with titanium or wolfram electrodes.